together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, every Thursday night, Revolution Radio streaming across 10 different platforms. Thanks for joining us wherever you are. You can see humanity is being collectively lied to. I look at these stories today and I see they're trying to tell us why wildfire smoke smells like plastic. And it's not just in one location, it's the entire planet. So you're telling me the entire planet's makeup of wildfire smoke from stuff like trees and bushes and grass now smells chemical and plastic. Really? What are they trying to feed us collectively on this type of story? It makes no sense. When you look at malaria from the mosquitoes, where genetically engineered mosquitoes were released, and we have now malaria outbreaks in the same places where these mosquitoes were supposed to stop any waterborne or mosquito-borne illnesses, yet it becomes the epicenter of a malarial outbreak. Exactly where they were released. Are we all witnesses in the stars, the movements of the heavens? I think we are. We're back in another cycle. Got to distract. You can't let the energy upgrade sweep through humanity, because that would mean the breeding stock for the elite class would disappear. They'd be stuck on the planet mining their own gold with their bare hands. Ransom, thanks for joining. You can tell everybody about your news if you feel like it. Exciting days, or we just keep zooming on the no slaves for the elite class, and they'll have to go back to manual labor again.
I've been doing a lot of manual labor. No, I got another newborn, so we're ecstatic about that. We're pumped about that. We got her home. Everything's healthy and legit, so we're happy about that. I was, just reading this article, speaking of mosquitoes, that I knew would be up. The news media is faster than like ever. I mean, when you realize that the power of artificial intelligence is running the news cycle, you understand why there's no gap anymore between the time an event happens, between the time that the official narrative or story or even the truth comes out versus everybody wondering, are things continually a coincidence? Are my lying eyes deceiving me? But anyway, here's a article from Newsweek. Florida malaria cases spark Bill Gates conspiracy theories. Just what you were talking about there. And what they're talking about is...
Wait a second, hold on. The mosquitoes were from him? I didn't know that. I just knew that there were a bunch of GM mosquitoes released, and then there was a malarial outbreak. No, there was nothing mentioned about Bill Gates in the article I was reading. It was just like, GM mosquitoes were released, and then suddenly there's malarial outbreaks. Are you serious?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That is quite coincidental, isn't it? But this looks like more like a hit piece against Luke Radowski directly there, because he tweeted a tweet out which basically said the same thing. So let me get this straight. Coincidentally, Gates releasing GMO mosquitoes in Florida and Texas, and now for the first time, Florida and Texas in 20 years are having malaria from mosquitoes. But don't go down that. Don't worry. There's readers added context to it, that some people might think. And the readers were the CDC because, the CDC has already looked over this idea. So I want to put everybody's fears and nerves to rest. We don't want any conspiracy theories getting out of here. Anyway, the tweet was cited by the CDC and Environmental Protection Agency, which has already evaluated the potential risk of releasing GM genetically modified mosquitoes into communities. And they determined, don't worry about it, they determined there's no risk to people, animals, or the environment. So you can not worry about that. Don't worry. It's just another one of a long line of awkward coincidences, I hope that, this doesn't turn out like the last kind of thing that we saw where, now it's common knowledge and news headlines that indeed the first victims of the last little medical marvel that went around the world. We're indeed the people that just happen to be studying that exact thing. And then, so don't worry about it. Just put your mind to rest, and don't worry about all these fires everywhere. I'm sure that's just climate change. Climate change is real bad this year. I've been really worried about it, and I saw a protester, from a few years back, and she might have been right. We're going to have to eat the babies to survive. I mean, because it's looking pretty bad with all this man-made normal temperatures that they're about to convince you that these are the first heat waves ever to go anywhere in the world. Actually, we just went through the heat phase, the one that they're really talking about on the news right now. Here's the heat map, and you can see down in New Orleans, it's like 108, 111 around there in Louisiana with the humidity. So they're saying, wow, these are record temperatures. They match another temperature that we had a few years ago, tying it. So it's not really a record breaker like they're saying. And actually here in New Mexico, we were 2 or 3 degrees cooler than normal. Even though we were having 105 degrees, it normally gets up a little more than that on average in June. So we're having hot days and cool days, but they are going to hammer you now with the weather. Living near green spaces could add 2 to 2.5 years to your life, new research finds. I don't know if that has anything to do with this massive amounts of wildfires. And seemingly it looks like mostly Canada. I mean, you can see here on this map in the United States, there's some little fires everywhere, which is quite common, actually. If there's fires here and there. And if you remember, we had a whole, summer of fires here in the U.S. just a year or two ago. If you remember that dominated the headlines before the new medical procedure went around the world. And so what do you think about that? Do you think that coincidences are just because, so many people are paying attention now that they find coincidences like those mosquitoes, which is weird because I've been having a Mandela effect with that, because I could have swore that, 10 years ago, I read the same article about said mosquitoes being gene edited and a certain number of them being released in Florida. It's like a Mandela, because I swear that these are repeating headlines. And then when you go look through the memory hole, which, by the way, may be disappearing due to quantum computers, and we can get into that later. The internet is basically a thing of the past now. It's kind of like dial-up. The dial-up internet was to, Ethernet. Like the cable coming to your house and giving you high-speed internet with the broadband. And then now we're, skip to the future, and there's an entire net of satellites surrounding the entire world. And what is, quote, unquote, the world that will not have any dead zones. In other words, any, chips or technology that you might be thinking about in connection with your social credit score or tracking and tracing every last human on Earth, there's not a spot you can go where they can't see you there. So it's kind of bizarre how all these fires, are breaking out, and nobody seems to know exactly why the fires break out where they do. I mean, because we have sophisticated technology these days where we can look at lightning activity and tell, was there 30 or 40 strikes in that area where the forest fire started, or was there just, 30 or 40 cell phones in that area? I mean, these are things that we could find out easily. So it's a wonder why there's so many mysteries and why the public has to reach for conspiracy theories. Not saying that the conspiracies that they're theorizing about are not true, because, most conspiracy theories are only conspiracy facts just a few years later. And here's a news flash for everybody, if they didn't remember it, in the last 2 years. Taking vitamin D supplements are linked to a better chance of avoiding heart attacks. Isn't that amazing? You remember a couple of years ago when the medical professionals were kind of downplaying the use of zinc and vitamins like vitamin D, and everybody's telling you, the sun is going to kill you. It's burning up the earth. I mean, think about all the anti-human facades and fictions that are going on right now to convince people to live the opposite of what the natural human being is. Because if you think about any kind of action that you can do today, like say you wanted to just go live out in the wilderness and you just throw away all your property and everything and you go out there and you start living, there will be some kind of government official to come out and tell you that you can't just walk around naked in the woods and hunt and gather. And, you know, of course, we don't want to do that, but they also tell us that taking things like vitamins and, you know, exercise and stuff is now all stuff that's not really, you know, needed for your health. All you need is a little bit of alteration, just a little bit of alteration. And matter of fact, we live in a day and age that you saw that one guy that wanted to gene alter himself so he could have bigger muscles a few years ago. And he was like the first guy that basically gene therapied himself. And, you know, they were kind of worried about what if his heart grew big and pumped that, you know, got too big for his chest and he had a heart attack because, you know, the heart is muscle. So we're living in a really advanced state of technology with a dumbed down public where we're listening to authoritative sources at lightning speed giving you bad information. Like how many times can you remember, David, that they told you that eggs were bad for you, and then followed by the next couple of years where they said they were good for you, and then the next couple of years after that they were bad for you again?
Oh, we're living in square caves. No different. You know, somebody that would find the remnants of our civilization and say, you know, 5,000 years from now, they go, oh, they all lived in square caves. How would our society be remembered? You know, there's really not that much that's of hardiness that would last. They might find a nuclear reactor laying around. They probably just find the fuel, and that would probably become a deposit for uranium mining anyway, because you just have to wonder what is found in veins that might, you know, decompose over time, or electrical input into that system, plasma discharge in that same area. Suddenly, whoosh, you got a melted field of it. It gets covered by some sort of cataclysm, and then, hey, there's uranium mining in this area, dense deposits. Gee, were those the old reactors that we were looking at? Because, you know, you say the last 3 years wasn't that bad for global warming and climate change because we were in the third straight La Nina cooling period of the Pacific Ocean. Now, the Pacific Ocean is warmed back up again. We're going into El Nino, which has effects on crop zones across the United States. All the traders know about it. If you're involved in agriculture, you actually plan for it, or, you know, take advantage of it. Or there's more rainfall, less rainfall. We didn't hear much about the whole climate thing for the last 3 years really pushed on top of you because, you know, I think there was a switch of last 3 years of different information being pushed on the public because the global warming couldn't be. Like, if you knew the cycles and you knew the third La Nina, well, temperatures are going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping. There's really nothing to make headlines are. Now, suddenly, did you notice in unison, everything quit in the last, you know, 2 to 3 months, and then suddenly the entire planet is on this El Nino / global warming thing again. Well, I encourage everybody out there, if you're on a computer right now and you're listening, go to this website called Polar Portal. Polar, Polar, Portal, like a portal into polar weather. It's run by the Danish Meteorological Institute. And then take a look at the Greenland ice mass budget, which means how much loss or how much gain. You'd be shocked. It's supposed to be melting on Greenland, but it's still holding and gaining ice in Greenland at the moment. Like, there's some very pronounced anomalies.
Are we having technical difficulties? I think we might be. Hey, you guys out there in the chat, did it go dead? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? What happened here?
And Ransom, I'll have to add you back in. Yeah, that is my bad. My computer dropped out. We've been having trouble with the internet here. It's on for some time, 4 or 5 hours, and just turn off, and you just need to unplug the cable and put it back in. And then other times, it'll stay on for 12 hours. And then another time, it'll turn off 15 minutes later. It's just really the weirdest thing with this internet and over the last month. But as I was saying, Ransom, is like, you know, you got all these experts telling you.
There we are.
Yeah, all these experts are saying, oh, it's going to be the warmest year, or not the warmest, but it's going to be the 1,200-year drought in California. Water's never coming back. We're going to have to move out of California. And then, you know, a couple of years later, literally less than 2 years later, all-time record snowfall, snowpack, massive floods everywhere, massive 5th, 6th arc storm filling the reservoirs from what was considered by the experts as drought, 1,200-year drought in California, to overflowing where they need to actually empty the water out continuously into the ocean because there's too much in every storage facility across California, and the entire West Coast is at 100% plus. And just 2 years ago, they said, oh, you're going to have to sell your house and move because it's going to be a 1,200-year drought, and it's the worst drought ever, and it's going to be a drought. And we're still listening to these people. I mean, Ransom and I sitting here coming up with way better calls on what's going to happen with the climate compared to these people who still get airtime. And how many claims have we heard? Oh, there'll be no more sea ice this year, that year. There'll be no more sea ice 2009. There'll be no more sea ice 2013, 2019, 2018. Oh, we got 5 more years of reprieve. Oh, this and that. I don't care how much money you give. You're not going to change the Earth's systems. And, you know, half the planet is still running away, developing their economy. So if the Western nations decide to cut to zero, the other half of the planet is just going to keep chugging along and still going to add 50% up there. And there'll be, if every Western nation goes to zero output, it still means that there's still 50% of that is still going to be put in the air because the other half of the planet is going to be like, whatever, you guys live in pig slop. We're going to build some new houses and have cars and have fun, bro. Get on the airplane. We're going to the islands. Or are you going to sleep out in the straw with the pigs in the back because you decided that you needed to go to net zero? Sir, you ain't coming on our private airplane. Except maybe to polish the wheels or something. But the third La Nina in a row, well, and that was, I can't remember where I got cut off, but you know, you got to think about how the narrative switched. You know, 3 years of consistent messaging for the last 3 years. And then suddenly El Nino's back and they knew the temperatures would rise. And anybody who out there is unfamiliar with temperature rises and falls in the thermosphere and our ocean temperatures, you got to go to this site. Dr. Roy Spencer.com. Doctor, like Dr. Roy, R-O-Y, and Spencer, the name, drroyspencer.com. And he runs the University of Alabama Huntsville and puts out the monthly tropospheric temperatures, lowest tropospheric temperatures. And you'll see routinely, every time there's a massive El Nino spike, well, the global temperatures rise. You should see that 1996 spike. So that's already an established pattern that when El Nino's back, global temperatures spike. When La Nina is here, if you take a look at those same global temperatures over the last 3 years, we were below the 30-year baseline for temperatures, below it. And you didn't hear many people talk about that because that totally threw the narrative out of. But everybody was too busy with whatever for the last 3 years, so you wouldn't even have noticed it, even if it did make news, because everybody's so terrified of everything else going on that there would have been no. Hey, by the way, have you noticed these temperatures have not risen, but they've actually dropped below the 30-year averages? Globally, for the temperatures, we're below the 0 point now. The Earth's actually cooling. But then again, it's a cycle. La Nina brings in global surface temperatures that are cooler because the Pacific Ocean is cooler. Now, they can't really come that clean. They keep saying El Nino and Nino, but they never really explain the mechanisms of the cooling on the La Nina side either. So even though they're saying and showing the cycle out there, they don't dissect it. They don't break it down easily enough for everybody to understand that the El Nino heats the oceans. Why causes global warming or warmer temperatures around the globe. And La Nina is an opposite and inverse because the deeper water is being pulled upward because of the pressure difference. And The oceans cool. Pacific Ocean cools, and that in turn cools the planet's temperatures. So the Pacific Ocean is a huge driver on, global temperatures. So if you already knew this, you could just ride the pattern with the news like we're seeing right now. There's nothing abnormal about this at all. I would encourage you to, take a look at the British thermometers that aren't included in the temperature set, say circa 1840, 1860, that 20-year era. The temperatures, according, were warmer than they are today. British Navy was doing a lot of traveling. You got to think British Navy, 1800s, early 1900s, were all over the planet consistently with trade routes, dragging thermometers everywhere. But since the record doesn't go back that far, sorry, anything that's prior to that doesn't count for some reason. So see, this is another fallacy in the whole climate debate is you're only allowed to use information in the satellite record, and you've been funneled like a cattle into a chute with that one. You can only use from 1979 to present. That's it. That's the gold standard. It's satellite data. And then you go further back, and you got like what things they call thermometers. And if you go further back, you get things like pressure readings. You can still catch rain in a cup and see how much it rained. That's called gravity. That's always here. But anything that's outside that established, say, 1880 forward doesn't count in the whole climate debate. They never want you to look back in further cycles. And when they do find anomalies that actually ping and are, blow away today's records, oh, that doesn't count. That was in the 60s. They couldn't measure that. That was a different time. There wasn't as many people. That was just a one-off thing. That affected that town because everybody was in that one town, and there were no other towns in the whole world except that town, and everybody was there, and that's why they were so heavily affected. It's not like today where there's people everywhere. Everybody's got cameras. They're seeing all the stuff now. You got to believe that our predecessors, our ancestors, people before us were incredibly intelligent. And since they didn't have computers to get dumbed down by, they did. They wrote meticulous records. Every household had a diary. Are you kidding me? Every household had a diary. So when obscure things would happen in the 14, 15, 1600s, people would write about it. Even if you had no education, you could draw a pictogram, you could have a book and draw pictures. So when we see this whole thing unfolding today, I'm looking at it saying, all right, what are they trying to hide from? What are they lying to us about? Is more the question. Because it's being bent right now that we are absolutely being lied to. And Ransom, I had my screen up. When you were talking, I got the fire and smoke map from Air Now. That's fire.airnow.gov for those of you in the States that want to look at this one. Fire, FIRE.airnow, AIRnow.gov. And this is the one I actually used to follow the derailment in Ohio, Palestine, Ohio. I do see one area right here that is PM 2.5, and it's Kittanning, Pennsylvania. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Air quality 208 parts per million, which is in the very unhealthy, borderline hazardous. But what we see across the U.S. here, all the way from Grand Rapids, Michigan, over to Philadelphia, it's all in the unhealthy, probably around 178 parts per million, 175 parts per million. But then if you go further up in Canada where the fires actually are, and this fire.airnow.gov does cover Canada also, lots of readings, little yellow things that look like stars are the major fires. But how is the air that's up near the major fires better than the air that's 500 or 1,000 miles south? I just look at some of these things going, whoa, and trying to tell us that the air now smells like plastic because of the sunlight is hitting the smoke and changing it to smell like plastic. I've been around a lot of fires in my life, man. Been around forest fires, been around grass, bush fires, have consistent fires, understand controlled burns in the forest. And you're telling me now suddenly that because the sunlight's striking the smoke that it's turning into a plastic smell. I just can't believe we're being gaslit the entire way. Everything they're saying is the complete opposite of the truth, but to tell us why. What are they trying to harvest out of us? Ransom, I'm not sure, man. Back to you.
What I think is amazing is that, you know, you read these articles that on its face value kind of sounds like propaganda in the first place. Think it's hot now. This study says Texas could reach 125-degree temperatures within 30 years. So now I'm afraid for in 30 years. But, you know, when you get down here and you actually read this thing, you always read these articles that say maybe, might, could be. And, you know, it's hard to read any or take any article that's supposed to be scientific seriously when they use words like that. But anyway, this is the part I thought was funny. It says the human body can no longer tolerate heat at that level, right? Which is 125. It's trying to tell you that we could at one time, but now you can't do that, right? So you can't live outside. You don't want to be outside. It's like everything that they've been telling us for the last 5 years has one thing in common. That's stay home, stay on the grid, stay connected, and don't travel. Don't travel, don't look up, don't go outside, don't enjoy yourself. And it was kind of like what we were talking about last week. It seems like no matter what the human activity, they come up with a reason not to do that. Oh, you know what? You guys can't be going out there having campfires, roasting your s'mores with your children, just like countless generations have done on this planet. But you can't do that because you're bad for the environment and you should stay out of there. And besides that, the human body can no longer tolerate heat at these levels. And it's talking about this study that was published back in 2010 that estimated that the wet bulb temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit at 100 degrees humidity or 115 degrees at 50% humidity would be the upper limits of safety beyond which the human body can no longer cool itself by evaporating sweat from the surface of the body to maintain a stable body core temperature. Now, there's one problem with that is they're not taking into account that, ancient man, including modern man, would cool off at one point during the day. It's well known that, you know, like when we've had these heat waves in the past, like up in Chicago and stuff, when they had sustained, you know, heat temperatures between 80 and 90 degrees for 2 weeks straight, where the night didn't cool off any cooler than the daytime, you had a lot of elderly people and people without air conditioning, people without fans, die because of the weather. So this is nothing new. And matter of fact, I was, just saying that to my kid like earlier today that I guarantee you that since the heat wave, the so-called heat wave that was basically normal temperatures here in New Mexico, at least, has moved on further to the south. That combined with power outages and tornadoes and et cetera, all things we've warned about, by the way, that you should prepare yourself not for a worldwide disaster or a world-ending event, but there's plenty of crises that can happen locally to you immediately and right now and only affect you in your area. Like, you know, like we've talked about before, power outages from hurricanes, fires. We're starting to get into the territory where that's not enough to keep everyone. And when I say keep everyone in perpetual fear, they use the normal things. That these are normal things. They're going to keep saying that, hurricanes are getting stronger. And we know that that's BS because there's evidence of hurricanes blowing sand all the way up towards the Great Lakes. We know these cycles continue to happen. It gets really hot. It gets really cold. And I already knew that we were going to have a hot summer, but not a too hot of a summer because I'm expecting El Nino to roll in and give us some monsoon on clockwork next month. And then they'll be saying that's climate change because there's a bunch of lightning strikes and a bunch of floods, flash floods in the desert, which are completely normal. And I've seen them my entire life, including the triple-digit temperatures, which they're saying is caused by global warming. And they're really going there. Like this article right here is giving an outlandish idea of a steady temperature of like 125 degrees, which is probably not going to happen. That's temperatures that are reached like if you went to Saudi Arabia in the desert or Qatar or Oman or something like that, way out in the middle of the desert or somewhere in the Sahara Desert. might have temperatures like that sustained for days in a row. But what's going on here in the U.S. is a normal heat wave that happens periodically. And I guarantee you can look at history and see the El Nino years, and you'll see the lightning storms and the monsoon and the supercells all go up Tornado Alley, causing heat waves, power outages, etc. The question is which disaster are you in the middle of? And are you prepared for that disaster? They're going to continue to use these things. But it's funny, like I said, that they said the human body can no longer tolerate it, meaning it did at one time and it can again, meaning if you go outside and you're farming and you're living outside and you're doing normal human activity, you're probably not at risk for some of these ailments that people that stay in a climate controlled bubble connected to the internet and entertainment, or whether they work in an office building, which is millions of people in the city, when reality comes, which is just normal Earth weather, nothing spectacular, no global warming, no man-made climate change, nada, just regular storms, tornadoes, heat waves, droughts, all of that stuff that humankind have lived through millions of years, obviously, to get to this point. The fact is the world hasn't changed. You did. You stopped living as part of the natural environment, and now people can no longer handle the weather. Now, me and myself, I go outside all day when it's hot. We have to go out. I come and cool off, and that's the key to that. If you have a way to cool off, which is meaning like if you have some kind of mister or water or take a shower or any of these things, even if you don't have power and you don't have air conditioning, all you have to do is cool down your body once a day to be able to regulate your body core temperature. And they're not going to tell you that in this article. They're just going to scare you and say it's hot and you're going to die and you need to pay taxes so we could stop this. There's the forest fires are choking us out. You're going to have to put your mask back on. And, by the way, the guy over there in England, he said we might have, bigger lockdowns because of the viruses and whatnot.
Such a good Brooklyn accent, Tommy over there. Sheesh. Hey, Ransom, I sent you a link in Skype there that goes to Tropical Tidbits, and it opens you to the 2 meter or the ground temperature anomaly map for temperatures. And as you spin through all the way to July 8th, 9th, 10th, it's just below normal temperatures all through the central grow belt and the grain growing areas of America. There's no heat wave there. It's some 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit cooler if you take a look at the maps. So everywhere we look, it is a moment of perception. I gave a talk last year saying that in conjunction with the Hunga Tonga eruption, that this year with the ozone depletion, and at that time it was unknown that we didn't know Shivalusha was going to erupt up to 78,000 feet just a few months back. Now we got the wildfires adding into all this other, sky detritus, for a better term, smoke, ash, sulfur dioxide, different chemicals within the makeup of the skies. There's only some places that are going to get warm. A lot of places are going to remain cooler because of direct sunlight blocking. Now you have people coming out directly talking about geoengineering to say we need to block the sun even further. Look, it's working in some places. So as this thing goes from warm to cool, and we are coming into a very much shorter summer period time this year because of, like I say, 2 major volcanic eruptions and then all of this extra smoke and thing in the air, from a logical standpoint, things that are blocking sunlight are going to block the sunlight. It might spike in temperatures for a minute, but as we move through, I bet summer ends abruptly and shortly this year. I mean, where we are in East Tennessee, finally, we just got into some warm days here. It's already almost into July. That's a month late from last year, or more. I hear a lot of people talking about it. The onset took a long time, but now that it's here, you pounce it on. And this is what I don't like either. When you're looking at these heat maps, do not let them fool you by showing you the heat index. Because I saw this map the other day and it showed 110 in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I was like, bro, it's never, it might have been 108 as some extreme one-day thing for an hour somewhere along in the last 130 years. But when I saw 110 in Knoxville, I'm like, no, that's impossible. And it was the real feel heat index. So they keep trying to push this real feel heat index more and more. Like, remember, they used to use wind chill, and they only really use that during blizzards because it'll make it seem cooler than, so they can't have you putting that together. So they'll always just show you the regular temperatures in in the wintertime. There'll never be the wind chill index is the main thing. Like, generally, they'll just put the temperature up and say it'll be, 27 degrees tomorrow. But if it was like they're doing now, they say, no, I actually feel like 3 degrees Fahrenheit because the wind. But they would start with, it's going to be 3 degrees Fahrenheit tomorrow with the wind. Real feel. Oh, by the way, it's only going to be this temperature, plus the real feel makes it feel like that, like you just explained with humidity. So do not fall for those images. They're doing the news backwards now. Like, before, they would tell you the temperature, and then they say because of the heat index, because of the wind chill, it'll be actually feel like this temperature. Now they're doing the inverse. I've noticed it again this year. They're doing it. It's the first year I've really, 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 really noticed it, that it's on every news broadcast going first. They'll do the heat index first. And then secondly, then they'll explain the real temperatures and what they did with the heat index to get you to those numbers. But if you only watch that for like 5 seconds and, oh, I got too busy, the kids over there, I got to wash the dishes. What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Oh, it's going to be 110 in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then you see somebody a week later and they're like, no, and you go, no, it was 110 in Knoxville. What are you talking about? This is exactly how they're doing it in the news right now. Very sneaky. The portrayal of a heat temperature, of a heat index versus a real temperature, at what point does it stop? Because I can't believe, now that's a forecast for me. By the way, I'll rerun that for a forecast here. This summer, yes, it's going to be warmer. We got the El Nino coming in super heavy, and we just came off of 3 La Ninas. So the El Nino, generally after that prolonged La Nina, it's going to spike faster and warmer faster. But it'll plateau eventually. But it's just the onset's really rapid because it was so cold that it just goes instant heat, whoosh, versus more of a transition zone where it slowly warms into. Because it was just kind of busting to the gut, waiting when the pressure differences hit, whoosh, that water is just ready to warm up. So my prediction is, for the rest of the year here, yes, the summer's going to be warm in some places, but other places will experience record cold, snows, blocked out sunlight, a lot of blight on the crops, a lot of opaque skies, a lot of weirdness in the temperatures, and things that just don't make sense, like the dew point and the humidity. It might start dewing in the middle of the day, and just like really unusual things where moisture will come out of the skies and cover things just based on pressure or temperature differences, but not at the rate it does now. Like, the middle of the day, and then, wait 12 hours later, or 14 hours in the middle of the night, yeah, you can see some dew forms on the grass. I'm talking about like 2 hours before sunset, and the minute before sunset, your entire yard is like, glistening, and even you're covered in water, kind of crazy things where every square centimeter of things is drenched from the difference in temperatures and this humidity point. But the summer is going to be shorter this year. The onset took longer, which was expected because of the Hunga Tonga eruption, and now the Shiveluche eruption, and now the smoke. Look at Greenland. Greenland's a perfect example. It is not melting the ice right now, but you won't hear that on any mainstream news. The summer's going to stop abruptly, and it's going to be an early onset into fall. Northern Hemisphere. And the thing about the Southern Hemisphere, it is going to extend forever for them to try to come out of the winter this year. And while they're trying to really extend to get out of the winter, we're going to go into a very abrupt, very quick fall period into cooling temperatures immediately. That was no joke when I said, everybody out there, I showed Ransom the tropical tidbits 2-meter temperature anomaly. The middle of our grow zones, our Midwest grain belt, is continuously below normal temperatures going out through here in June. And I'll come back to it. This is off the weathernetwork.com. No, there's not a pile of tires on fire nearby. The smell of burning chemical plastics and rubber is from the wildfires. So really, what's happening with this? And, I come down and, oh, here it is. I'll read it for you word for word because you can't see me. The power of the sun Ultraviolet radiation, UV radiation from the sun does more than just give us sunburns. It can interact with compounds already in the atmosphere and create new compounds. Like I'm a pretty intelligent reader and I know a little about science. Why don't you name a couple of them? Like chlorine oxide, bromine oxide. No, I'm not sure what happened with the O3 ozone. Oh, wait, to tell you, for example, ozone at the surface level, smog is caused by air pollutants such as nitrous oxide gases being broken up by UV radiation. The extra oxygen molecule then joins up with two free oxygen. Well, they mean O2. They're kind of confusing. Joins up with the free oxygen, O2. Okay, oxygen, it's a dipole. It needs two to snap together to make the molecule. You can't have one oxygen running around. It's kind of rare to see that. I mean, it happens in chemical processes or whatever, but this is also why the smog is the most common in urban populations just after rush hour on sunny days. The vehicle exhaust, here it is. I thought we were talking about forest fires, and here they are telling you vehicle exhaust is the problem with the UV interaction in a city full of smog. Like, where's the transition point of this? They're just this huge satellite goes, visible satellite showing you from Chicago to Toronto all the way to the East Coast, just blanketed in smoke. And then recently, it transitions from the power of the sun explaining smoke into you're creating the pollution in a city, you bad human. Like, how do they even get away with this? Unbelievable. And it's such this is the kind of journalism that's out there now. Everything swings you back into pollution, global warming, CO2, cars are bad, people are bad, houses are bad, everything's bad. Your marshmallow roasting on 4th of July is bad. The making it cooler of the plastics that you're having your drinks in is bad. Everything's bad. It's your fault. Special air quality statement. Everything's going to smell acrid and like smoke because that's just the way it is, and it's because of the sun, dude. But they did tell some truth with that. The ozone depletion event. Well, they didn't really talk about UVB radiation striking the ground because of ozone depletion. But they do say there's an increased amount of ultraviolet radiation coming down, but they don't explain how or what. So it's kind of I guess, interpret it as your own. Because whoever wrote this is probably at 8th grade education, didn't have the nuances of the science built in, one-sided on the argument about it's all global warming, didn't explain anything about ultraviolet radiation and changes of compounds in the atmosphere, which, if you know anything about ozone, you should know the chemicals that it breaks higher in the atmosphere, different things down into different chemical constituents. Doesn't talk about levels of the atmosphere, doesn't talk about 2-meter ground level, doesn't talk about, 500 millibar heights, or it doesn't tell anything about which layer of the atmosphere we're in. It's just it's such a generic, super simpleton reading article. Like I said, 8th grader probably put this one together here. But for it to be on the Weather Channel as a main feature story, you think you would have had an adult come in here and at least read this and say, whoa, you might want to put a couple more snippets of something in here. I don't know. I was disappointed. You know what? You see, now Ransom, you just had a new child, so maybe one day you'll just be disappointed and you look at him and you go, I am disappointed in you. And that's the same way I look at this Weather Network article here, and just journalism in general has switched into this barely any information whatsoever. So general, it's just beyond belief and interpretation. And I could take the same article and interpret it in a completely different way. And I sure wouldn't put the heat index temperatures before. It's just everywhere you look, it is, I don't know, we're being collectively lied to. And we're supposed to believe that it's now the truth. And Ransom, I know you have a book or two that you'll throw as an example of lies or truth and truth or lies. But what is that smoke smell from, man?
Maybe it's from all the trash that, everybody left out in the forest. And that's why you can't go out there. And actually, if you look at where those areas are at, man, those are places, most of those fires don't seem to be around any people. That's the least populated area in Canada up there.
Yeah, it is so remote. I looked at the maps a few times. and they're in like the 100,000 lakes areas. Like there's no roads, man. You can't even get, you'd have to portage anything to the next. It's super remote out there. I mean, super remote.
Well, I've smelled a lot of forest fires. I mean, I live right next to a chunk of the Rocky Mountains with big pine forests. And matter of fact, there's a fire up there right now. We've been watching the with the Chinooks and some of the other firefighter planes and helicopters carrying water up to the mountain to drop it off. And this isn't the first forest fire I've been around, so I don't know what would cause the plastic smells in there. And it is weird that it's located kind of really far away in an area that just was famous for something else recently. When I was when I'm looking at that map that you sent over here, what is it? This one? Yeah. So all the fires are up here, and let me let the audience look. And there's a key thing that you said a second ago that they keep using the index because they like to play off feelings. We're no longer in the reality phase of civilization. We have to treat people how they feel. It doesn't matter what reality is. If you believe it and you feel it and you identify, that's how come words are violence now and things like that. So if you feel like it's 115 degrees, it really is, even though it's only 99 degrees. And it's really funny when you look across the map, most of these temperatures are nothing that I haven't seen before on the temperature maps in those areas in the middle, the beginning of summer. It gets hot and muggy in the south. I hate to tell you, it's been doing that forever.
It's summertime. Jeez.
Right?
To the world, it's summer.
Yeah, well, everybody's acting like it's a big deal here, but all you have to do is look at the historical data of the temperatures, and you would see that, this is the hottest part of the year here, and it does that every time. About the 4th of July, we get monsoon or we don't, all depending on the cycle. But then we get like a month of rain, and we could have 100 degrees in the day and 60 degrees at night because it cooled off from the monsoon. But it is bizarre. If you look at this map, why are all the red dots seemingly right around all of the areas that you would expect smog from cities and a certain something that just happened recently there that put out a lot of stuff in the air? I'm not saying that that's what it is, but I was watching a documentary the other day where they're going around in all of these areas where that certain something didn't even happen, and it wasn't in the area of the fallout, so to speak. And they're finding, like in the radiators and the air filters of the cars and everything, these dioxin compounds that are coming from somewhere. Maybe it's coming from all the forest fires. But isn't it weird how, I was using an example of last year. We had one of the worst forest fires in New Mexico, and they listed, I don't know how many articles I read that said it was climate change that caused it, even though I know for a fact that the Forest Service was burning leaves and their controlled burn got out of control. But, that's because of climate change made their controlled burn get out of control or something like that. But anyway, we're in the era of fictional stuff. It doesn't matter what reality is. If people feel like their president's a good president, it doesn't matter that he gets caught doing all kinds of illegal stuff. I mean, think about the clown show that's going on right now in the political arena, and then ask yourself, do I really believe these people when they talk on other topics? So if I'm watching media and they're completely ignoring the fact that, the president of the United States is pretty much busted, paying for play and, with enemies of the United States, no less. And we're just going to blow that off and ignore it because people don't feel like he's a bad guy. They feel like the other guy's a bad guy. So we're going to have a repeat of the last election here where we get to see two old guys basically argue about who's going to, give us medication better again. I think it's going to be a repeat. And what's going on right now is just a bunch of humongous distraction to keep you from paying attention that basically we're in a banana republic now. All the signs are there of a communist takeover and a financial collapse. They keep saying the environment, the economy is so great, just about everything that the administration or the authoritative sources at this point are telling you, if you just look into it yourself, you'll find out that's the exact opposite of what's going on. And they need all of these distractions nonstop. They got to have you worried about the heat. They got to have you worrying about the polar ice caps melting, even if they're not. What about the polar bears? Are you still worried about the poor polar bears? You remember years ago they were telling us they're all going to die, they're going to be gone, and now there's more numbers than ever. They're just like everywhere. They're overpopulating. It's like a species that got saved that wasn't endangered. That's what that looks like. You know how we always go to say
numbers for you right there, man. I study the polar bears.
All right, let's hear about the polar bears because.
In the 1970s, there were 5,000 polar bears, and everybody's like, the polar bears are going to go extinct. They're going to go extinct. Baby harp seal, same time. Okay. So how many polar bears do you think are in the Canadian Ice Service survey? So if anybody wants to follow along with this, you need to go to Canadian Ice Service, and then you go to Polar Bear Survey. Now, Ransom, I'm going to let you guess. So there were 5,000 polar bears in the 1970s. How many polar bears are now from the latest Canadian Ice Service Polar Bear Survey? Give me a guess, man. I need a guess. Throw me a number. 25,000. So it moved in the 1970s from 5,000 to 25,000 polar bears. Now, here's the crazy thing. Only half the Arctic was surveyed because over on the Russian side, they didn't allow the Canadian scientists or whatever they were at that point to go over there. So the Canadian Ice Service itself only encompasses half of the Arctic on its survey. So what's on the other 50% over there? Even if you add another
count communist Russian back.
Yeah, like how many do you think in Russia? Obviously, there's got to be some. So if we have 25,000 polar bears just on the, this half of the Arctic, what's on the other half? So them babbling about the polar bears, I got in an argument with a guy with a PhD, and then as soon as he knew, I knew, and then he was like, oh, let's just not talk about that, No, let's keep talking about that. What about that ice up on Greenland? By the way, I'll look for that link. I sent you a link to Polar Portal with the Greenland ice mass budget, so you can just pop that up there on the screen and let people see that blue line is the gain of ice in the melt season where it should be melting. It should be below the black line. We should have almost no ice on Greenland. We all should have drowned already. Do I sound a little facetious and kind of like, oh, not again, not another summer of garbage. Another summer of garbage headlines.
You can't count Russian bear as polar bear. They're communist bear.
Yeah. Wonder if Russian polar bears drink vodka. Like how many polar bears have broken into somebody's house or a warehouse or whatever and drank all the vodka in there? That would be definitely a Russian polar bear thing.
It's like cocaine bear, but for Russia.
Oh man, no, that'd be dangerous, man. If a bear got into a kilo or something and sniffed all that up, oh, can you imagine like a big, huge Kodiak bear running around? Oh, that'd be terrifying. Grizzly bear on a kilo. Oh man.
No, really. Have you not seen that? That's one of the movies my kid made me watch. There's a movie out right now, Cocaine Bear. It's about exactly what you think it's about. Yeah, here's this map though, the Polar Portal. I had this earlier. So what are we looking at here? You got the red and the blue dots here and the little circles. Is that the movement of the ice that we're looking at?
No, the red and the blue of the dots on the map there, that just shows you how much gain or loss there is. So it should be right at, the dots are just specific measuring stations. So here's the thing again, since you're all looking at that map, you have to realize wherever you see a black circle, that's where a weather station is. And that's what they use, those combined weather stations, to give you the temperatures. Now, for me, I look at that and go, there's a lot of uncovered area on that map there. So the dark black circles are a weather station. And you can look at it, just hover over it, and it'll show you what the temperature is and whatnot. So I'm hovering over the one, obviously no data where the biggest snow gain is. Imagine that. So back on the biggest snow gain, kind of around 3 o'clock position, halfway up in the middle of Greenland there, it says 7.2 degrees Celsius below zero. So we're down into the 20s still. And then, everywhere you look across. But I was mainly focused on the bottom of the chart there where it says mass gain. You're looking for that blue line in the gray chart. Just go below the island picture there. And when you see the blue line, that's the gain of ice. So you can see how long it's already extended into the melt season where it's not even below into the averages on the 30-year average to getting close to that melt yet. We are so far above that. Like if that was the inverse, if that was a melt going below that line, this would be a front page headline on how global warming is affecting Greenland. But because we're like 6 sigma over ice gains above the averages, you won't hear a peep about this. Until we come back to the second hour, thank you for joining us. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin, your time is valuable. We appreciate it. Please join us for the second hour. Share with your family, friends, and get them all involved in the conversation. Back in a couple minutes.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
I've never realized a time that was more necessary to make sure you have a backup of food than there is right now. We see all of the food markets going expensive, every item. And some of these items that they offer in these kits are approximately $1.50 to $2 a meal or serving, which is quite a bit cheaper than anything that you're buying now. I'm really interested in the protein pack, because this is where, even if you're gardening and you're not going to have these proteins, but you can stack them back. And this thing has chicken, beef, eggs. So it has a lot of protein that maybe you could mix with the stuff that you're growing. I'm really thinking that this summer is going to be starting all of the hard times as far as it is for people with food. So I think this, beyond any other time that you've thought about buying storable foods, is probably the occasion to give yourself some insurance so that when hard times come and the trucks stop coming, you have a backup plan. At least you have nutrition to get you by. And some other people are not going to be doing that. They're going to be having difficulties and maybe even finding themselves in aggressive situations with hundreds of other people trying to get supplies that are no longer there. And these kits have everything. Fruit, you got the meat. It's all stuff that you're going to need to survive. The insurance that people need right now, I just don't think there's ever been a comparable time other than maybe when, we had soup kitchens in the 20s and right again in the 40s when things were becoming thin again. And we're in that time now. And when you start looking at world events, you can see that the food supply is going to be tied up with multiple different events around the globe. And you don't have to worry about those things if you have this taken care of. You can get 6 weeks, you can get months, depending on the size of your family. This is definitely insurance for survival, because other people are going to be fighting over the scraps that are left at the store, and you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, the seeds as well, to be able to grow some of your own food in addition to having stored foods. But when it goes down, it is going to go down, and things that you think about it right this second. Everybody's talking about buying gold and silver as a way to hedge against inflation or be able to have something to be able to pay your property taxes in the future. With the devaluation of the currency, well, it will be the exact same thing. Now, do you have enough money to buy an ounce of silver? Perhaps you do. It's the same thing with food preps. The 1 week kit compared to something like a full 6 weeks kit or a 12-week kit. Even if you get just one small minimal thing to add to your stack. I talk to people who prep all the time. It's always about tools, storable foods, water filtration, and a way for you able to store water and filter it at the same time. Because if you can get that closed loop enough, there's always going to be somebody that will help you garden with those seeds. Heirloom seeds is where you want to go. Heirloom open pollinator seeds. Because at the end of the day, when you collect those seeds at the end of your season for growing, you want to be able to store those and then have them so you can replant next year. I think that supply chains are going to start constricting even further. I mean, look at the way that the world laid out. These really incredibly complex supply chains are now starting to fracture in the middle of everywhere. You know, political strife. We didn't even talk about the ozone depletion event that's going to wipe out food production further in the Southern Hemisphere. The tipping point. Humanity's here. We're seeing it everywhere. So how do you protect your friends and family? Because you got to think, everybody has survived. We would not be here having this conversation if people had not survived the last 8,000 or 10,000 years of events that were far greater than what we're going to experience. It just takes a little prepping, a little bit readiness, and I do believe that we'll be able to get through this.
You know, when we're talking about these seeds and the storable foods to go with it, you're going to have to probably invest in both of these ideas. When you go through the list of the seeds that they give you, these heirloom seeds, they're the best type of food that you could possibly get or grow yourself. But you have this backup of the food storage that lasts 25 years.
And that's heavensharvest.com. Use the code ADAPT at checkout. That's ADAPT. Take 15% off your order.
Whatever comes your
Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And yeah, we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm right here tonight, David DuByne, along with Ransom Godwin, bringing you through the second hour, talking about, you know, how collectively that we're being lied to as a species, or, you know, just humans on the planet in general. There's something that is being deflected away from in terms of the power we have and something of value that we have that we just don't know about yet. Because the way that we see the world morphing and bending at the moment, it's for a distraction. Like everywhere you look, you cannot come away from the distraction. Unless I leave my phone right here on the desk, and then I walk outside into my forest, then the only thing there is the trees. And really everything else disappears. There's nothing else. Into the garden, there's no something going on over halfway across the world and this, that, and the other. It's just me and the plants. So it is a collective thing to bend the mind, because if you drop your device and you literally walk away from it and you go into a place of nature, that doesn't exist anymore. It really doesn't. I find that fascinating, being able to step in between these two worlds. And why is this world being structured for us so we don't see something? That's what the structure is all about, is to keep us deflected from seeing something. And I don't mean, you know, seeing the truth and something so vague like this, but I really mean seeing something. Seeing objects, seeing something with your own eyes, that you look at it, you view it, but the media tells you you're seeing or observing or having a sense experience of something else that's not really what your senses are seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting or touching, that your own body is lying to you. That the media is collectively telling you, no, even though your body tells you this one thing, your senses that you've grown up with your whole life from whatever age, even up to 100, those are not telling you the truth anymore. Your body, your senses, they're deceiving you. Only we will tell you now what to believe. So even if you see it with your eyes, they will tell you with a straight face to disbelieve what you saw with your own eyes, or what you smelled with your own nostrils. This is the most amazing thing, to watch this transformation on the bending of information too, to portray it in a certain way so that will stick with you in terms of on the frontal lobes, that you're going to jump back in and defend the system. Oh yes, it was 110 degrees in Knoxville this last week, and look, it was on the news. Sorry, that was the heat index. You know, these kind of things that are going to get built in. So Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us speak about it tonight. You know, getting touchy. I was demonetized on another set of videos over from my regular Adapt 2030 YouTube channel, talking about the Canadian forest fires. And this was from an insurance agent, a friend of mine who's a reinsurance. When I never really get too deep in it, and he doesn't talk too much about it. It's just determining insurance risk for areas. And he was saying that there are areas in Canada that are being right now determined and coordinated, literally with coordinates, like this, from this area here, from whatever north to this many degrees west, are going to be off limits for insurers to reinsure properties. And when you do that, you're going to have your banknote pulled on your home, because if you can't insure your home, then you're not going to be able to hold the mortgage, and you defaulted on it because you didn't have insurance. That's part of your mortgage the way it is. So, I got that from the horse's mouth, that they're already talking about fire risk zones and non-insurance up in Canada, and those same areas of like the 10,000 lakes area, 100,000 lakes, really remote. You can see it now. To sound a little bizarre, the reason that you would think that there's so many lakes up there, glaciers were there. And if you believe that a comet slammed into the ice sheet right there and formed Hudson Bay, and that's what the Younger Dryas impact was all about, was that comet slamming into that glacier with such impact that it penetrated 2 miles deep and scoured out Hudson Bay. That was the impact crater. Luckily, it landed on an ice sheet first, And those giant Carolina bays that nobody could explain, there was never an impactor. That was the ice that got fragmented off and flew some several thousand miles south and landed in North Carolina, all in the same direction, boom, 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 and it left all those, what they call the Carolina bays. But then very close to there, can you imagine the impact and the shocks? That would crack the crust. Why do you think there's so many lakes there? Go south and go to the west, and you'll see like endless amounts of lakes off of Hudson Bay. Now, why is that? Well, if you go further back in the past, these cataclysms that we've seen just even so recently as 12,000 years ago pale in comparison to anything that a human could do on this planet, in terms of putting a gas into the air to drive changing temperatures. Are you kidding me? And the 8.2K year event also, some say 8.1 and some say 8.2. It's within a 100-year variation. The temperature dropped some globally 10 degrees Fahrenheit, 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, global temperature drop. Wiped out the population at the time because they couldn't cope fast enough. But they changed agriculture and they couldn't feed themselves. Full-on society and population collapse. 8.2K year event is mainly the one I go with. Some, like I say, some is between 8,100 and 8,200 years before present, somewhere around in that 50-year mark, like 8,150, if you want to be exact, somewhere around there. Very much similar to our 535, 536 AD, which Ransom references all the time. But what is inbound right now, or what is happening that, like I say, this whole, every time you turn on a publication, is to distract you away from seeing something that's truly in front of you, or you're observing something that's truly in front of you, but that the powers that are, in control of the media across the planet don't want you to see it. Or if you do see it, they don't want you to believe you saw it. I don't know, maybe I'm rambling. It's getting late in the night, Ransom. I'm not sure, man. You read my mind better than most during these conversations.
I think it's just all part of this fictional world that they're kind of choosing to give everybody. And then, I was talking a minute ago about the internet being a thing of the past, kind of like they're updating it, and they keep talking about the metaverse. That's because they plan on getting rid of the idea of free knowledge, the ability for people to share that knowledge. That's why they've been cracking down on uploads, downloads, content. And here's an interesting article, in my opinion. It's not about what I'm talking about, but I think it is, if you really think about it. National Geographic lays off the last of its remaining staff writers. And it gets down here and it talks about,
bye-bye.
Right? So now all of the people that are actually writing or editing these stories are no longer going to work there. And why is that? Because they don't need them. And if you look down here further, it talks about how they're going to fire the last of these guys, but it's okay because they'll piece together stories from this and that, using different stuff, pieced together by different freelancers and editors. You guess who those freelancers are most likely going to be? AI, Chat GPT are going to be writing these things. So, me and you probably got used to in our youth reading a National Geographic, and they're showing a famous one right there. I used to read this from cover to cover, not saying everything in it was good or the truth or anything like that. However, it was written by real people, and real people went out and took photographs, and real people went out and did anthropology. You may or may not agree with their findings about things, but the fact is it's not a algorithm controlling your information. And, you know, when you're looking at the administration of the United States, a guy that has notes and calls on reporters for pre-programmed questions and answers, and I said that on purpose, programmed by who? We don't know. And yes, they are trying to get people to stare into the monolith, kind of like on the Space Odyssey 2001. And that's exactly what they were talking about at the time. It was the silver screen. Now we have more of a monolith these days, and it's this little thing we call an android, or, you know, a bite out of the apple, the proverbial bite into the tree of knowledge. And you can see exactly, like in their icons, what they're trying to do. They're trying to control that tree of knowledge. And this is just one of many, gone with the wind type things, with no more magazines, no more books, no more, newspapers. All of the old data stored in the colleges and different things are on old types of technology, which means that I'm going to circle back to what I was talking about earlier. There are several articles out right now talking about how the quantum computers are going to destroy the internet because they're going to replace it with a whole different way of computing, thinking, and at that point they can censor literally almost like pre-crime ahead of time, because you're computing with 0, 1 and 0 and 1 at the same time, which gives them great computing powers and predictive powers of algorithms that are monitoring, guess who? You, on how you live, what you choose, what you believe, how you feel, what drugs are going out into the public. I mean, think about the massive technocratic state that we live in right now. AI is controlling everything at this point, from veterans' healthcare to your healthcare. And now when countries are putting up the idea of, you could just go to the government and ask them to off you instead of treat you, it makes you wonder why there's so many, deadly diseases or conditions that make people terminal in the first place. But now they're offering another in a long line of depopulation tools to the public. Now, at the same time, they're just keeping everybody distracted so they can't think of these big ideas. Now, I'm not going to say there was a certain group around in the 30s and 40s that happened to use a certain compound in their compounds to make the workers lethargic, but not too lethargic, not so lethargic that they couldn't understand how to do basic remedial tasks like push a button or crank a lever or do something like that. They needed them to continue to work, to be the automatons, the robots. But they were so lethargic. Oh, yeah. Well, they had this certain thing, but we use it everywhere here now. It's like everywhere. You can't go anywhere without a municipality dumping that same compound in the water to keep the public lethargic. Now, think about this also, and I'm a big advocate for the cannabis plant, and I believe in it. It has a lot of uses. We could save the world with it. All of that's not, just a meme. It's true. You can make food from it. You can make oil from it. You can make plastics. You can almost the limitless stuff, hemp creek, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention the medical properties of it. So, they made that illegal, but all of a sudden they want it legal. And these are in the same, and I'm going to say leftist because that's what the states are due. So they have the most crazy of the cultural revolution ideas going on, but that's okay because, they got a water supply, and they also have, a lethargic store on every corner. And like I said, I'm not against the decriminalization, especially, or the legalization of the cannabis plant to be used in any way you want to use it. But it seems ironic to me at this specific time in history. It seems like it's spreading like wildfire. Like, so for example, I live in the Southwest in New Mexico. And when I was growing up, that was considered like a big time criminal thing. I mean, they would, if they smelled something in your car, they would yank you out. You'd be on your nipples on the sidewalk. They'd be patting you down. You'd have guns pointed in your face. They would search your car. They would treat you like a dirtbag, a criminal. Now there's a dispensary about, I don't know, every block or so, like 15 or 16's popped up in the last year. So on every corner, it's like if you've ever seen the movie Boys in the Hood, they're talking about Compton and why the local area has been, destabilized on purpose. And he said, well, look around. You see liquor store, gun store, pawn shop. It's like that here, except for now they've added a couple of more things to destroy civilization and culture. So now you got a pawn shop that's still, taking all the inherited wealth because people are pawning it to go to the other stores. Now you got a liquor store and a dispensary and an abortion clinic, and these things are all in a row. Like they're going up faster than that's the only places to get jobs, it seems like now. So why would they want at a specific time in history? And you're talking about pointing out how many lies are in each topic that you could get into, whether it's the climate, whether it's the government, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the sciences of different kinds, i.e. medical science, DNA, the history of mankind, where it came from. When you look at all these topics, all you find are complete fictions and lies, and it's right in your face. So now we're coming to that era where at the same time they're allowing the public to be lethargic in a legal way, from the natural world, but also not to mention all the pharmaceutical drugs that people have been eating for years, SSRI, reuptake inhibitors, the list goes on and on, opioids, and all of the different destabilization campaigns that are associated with even them, like the Middle East wars, or you could pick Vietnam, you can go on and on. These are all set up and they're all coming into a culmination, a singularity of right now, where they're changing the human being from a bright, conscious, intelligent, entity that has ingenuity into a lethargic person that's uneducated, dumbed down, malnourished, and we can't even talk about the real scientific things that are happening because we'll get in trouble for it. But needless to say, is the entire genome is being replaced and cataloged and controlled, patented, copyrighted. And at the same time, every facet of the human domain is headed to one outcome, and that's the depopulation and the extinction of the Homo sapiens sapien, to be replaced by a created, designed, lethargic worker bee transhuman cyborg, if you want to call it that, because at some point you can see that totalitarian governments in the future will not ask for your permission to change your DNA with gene therapy, and they will not ask your permission to chip you, track you, trace you, and not to mention control what you think. And, it was science fiction movies up until this point, but with what's been going on in China as an example, you can see where the rest of the world is going. And it's hard for me to see that we're going to have a great war with China for any other purpose than a kinetic men against men depopulation war, because it would be pointless to their plan to just, go in a super hot war and nuke everything. But they could nuke a few cities just to instill the fear and power of their new programs in the Great Reset. And if you recently saw Klaus Schwab speaking, he praises the Chinese Communist Party for their totalitarian ways and how they kept, a controlled society, and how he's one of many. You can pick George Soros or what's his name, Kissinger, that's been in politics, forever. I think he's a robot in a rubber suit. But, regardless of that, all kidding aside there, he's been saying that ever since that him and Nixon opened up China to the West, that this was the plan to turn the world into a communist capitalist society. And now when you realize the technological implications of what's going on around you, from gene editing to complete digital control of every media source, image, sound, and the fact that they can manipulate all of them, including fake sound, fake visuals. You cannot even believe what you see on the news at this point. Deep fake and algorithm AI learning machines and fake everything, fake articles, fake stories, fake images. Just think about how many times they've showed you a computer generated image of a black hole when they haven't even proved the idea of the black hole and still don't even know what the object is, because the black hole is still just a mathematical concept that they came up with. Now, there's something there, and it seems to be a giant plasma gravity, ball that's out there, kind of the next evolution of a star. But it seems not to be a hole, but yet they keep pushing that idea. And you find this in every arena of education, from the origins of man, like I said, to climatology. I mean, they make up stuff constantly. They give you a narrative. They don't include most of the information. So, that term lying by omission, that could sum up the entire educational and media empire that's running the human mind at this point.
Yeah, that'll be the future, Ransom. I really do believe it'll be the future. Is they'll have to have a human validator. But that's the scare. That's where it gets into the strangeness, because you'll have to have a human next to you to validate that you as a human created human-made content. So with all the deepfakes and everything, how do you find a human that's really a human? It could not be, because oh, this is my human validator, look right here, and then you have an interview with them, and then they could have a contingent of 200 people that swear that they knew this person since going to high school with them. But would they all be fake images and fake generated personalities too? Now, sometimes I look at this world, and even though I heard this before, that the world you constructed, the world that exists around you, is from you, and you alone created it. Now look at it with a different set of lenses, saying maybe what I am in right now is everything was holographically produced, and I'm in an AI simulation, and everything that's possibly made from any combination of things I thought AI had created alternates of those to spin them into my existence, and everything around me is a complete illusion. But I sit in a space of quiet. My own thoughts created this singular world, and none of you exist, and I'm here. I'm talking into emptiness. Everything's an AI-generated reality of anybody I've ever met. Maybe we don't know. What if the robotics get that good where you won't know the difference between human flesh like they talk about in just a few years? You won't be able to distinguish. I mean, really, at that point, then what? You could have an alternate reality, an alternate world for every single human if you believe in a multiverse. I got lost in the thought there. Living in square caves, man. You were talking about, again, how are they going to get people off the land? How are this thing going to move? And these alternate realities to get you to move from your habitation back into a city, get you under control again, get you off the land, can't have your spring water. I won't say who it is, but I know a few people close to me. They come over to the house and like, oh yeah, hey, we just got the spring water here. You want spring water? And they're like, no. That hasn't been treated yet. I really mean like spring water is coming out of the mountain behind us, and we have a pipe jammed in the mountain back there. So it comes right into the pipe, straight out of the mountain, and then down. Well, it's not really, it hasn't been treated yet. And I'm like, it's coming down copper pipes from the mountain. It's like some of the purest water on the planet. So here's what they're going to try to get you off the land. Free. You get charged for water these days. We should have free water. And the reason I stopped there for a second is last night we had five Black Hawk helicopters come over the house, going from Knoxville straight south, and they passed over our area. It's the first time I'd ever heard helicopters, so it really, really, really grabbed my attention. First it was one. I was like, whoa, that's a big one. And then it might have been a Chinook and another one, but two of them came by in a pair, and then another two pair. And then I thought I just heard them out there again with the coo. We can hear those blades quite a ways off. But that was strange because they had red running lights on, and you could sort of see them exactly from the side. But as soon as they twisted even the slightest bit, boom, they disappeared. So getting people off the land here. This is something that's going to make news, and I'm just going to give you a glimpse here into what's happening. So if you haven't seen, our corn prices have spiked, wheat prices have spiked. We're at 100-year low in wheat production. So, food's going to get more expensive as we cruise through our year here. But here is a person they bought. The person's name is Thomas. in 2015 bought 80 undeveloped acres, meaning forest property, in rural southwest Nebraska. Now, you hear Nebraska, you think they'd be farmer friendly right away. So how are they trying to get this guy off his land? So he's got 80 acres out there. So the EPA sues this guy saying, oh, you clearing your land. You ruined part of an estuary that was never marked as a set-aside sanctuary estuary. And he's like, no, it was just a bunch of overgrown invasive species that I was clearing, plus all the deadfall made wildfire hazards more hazardous. So I wanted to clear all the deadfall and clear all the invasive species as defined by Nebraska as an invasive species into our state to eradicate it from the property so it doesn't spread any further. So they said, oh, because the property was adjoining to the Platte River, that you destroyed wildlife habitat on their own property, clearing decayed trees and an invasive species, and they were fined $300,000. 300 grand. So the EPA says, we will absolutely see your lawsuit in our in-house investigation. And he sued the EPA and he's like, nope, not doing an in-house investigation because you're the ones who charged me. You're the ones who have everything against me. And you have your own quote unquote lawmakers within here or some sort of oversight body within your own regulatory organization that is then going to go against us. And we're not going to do your in-house silliness anymore. So they are suing the EPA to get outside to a regular jury of peers. Because being judged by employees of the same agency making the charges against him seems a little absurd to me. Because the EPA is a for-profit organization funded by our government when there are shortfalls. The EPA is there to fine, like a bad police officer, to fine you on July 4th, going 2 miles an hour over the speed limit because it's a revenue generator. EPA is not your friend. They're not there to protect anything other than big business and get you off your land. So this is another thing. So does that mean anywhere that any of us ever do any kind of stream work, then suddenly you're destroying something of a habitat? Because they could use that on anybody that has property anywhere in the country. Literally, oh, well, this went into a tributary further down into the stream and then down the stream, but you destroyed that part by putting a rock wall in there and it wasn't naturally filtered by the willow trees and whatever else was up in there. They could really pull this with every single person who has a couple acres and keep pulling the same trump card over and over. So the charge from this guy was the EPA says to him, we're going to levy you a $300,000 fine. And the accusations are dumping dirt, dumping rock, converting a culvert, cutting down trees, and dumping what they call spoil, which is a mix of sand or anything that you'd use from a backhoe and dig it up. That's not just one particular, not just sand. It's not just topsoil. It's not just rock, certain kind of river rock or whatever. Spoil, it just means it's a hodgepodge and a mix of everything. Okay, that's what happens when you clear property. And this guy was specifically going to cut down the trees that were fire hazard. And see, this is where it gets really gray and kind of murky. The EPA is finding this guy for actually doing and improving his property. But somehow, because an invasive species was involved with something that was an unclassified swamp, basically, they claim it was 5.7 acres of wetlands, which was never defined as a protected wetland area. But again, you can see how deep these actions are going. Okay, this is going to be a landmark case because if the EPA wins on this guy, and they will not let him have a jury of his own peers, that's just what he's suing for, is he's like, I don't want to have your in-house judgment, charges against him in-house, and then the PLF attorney, whatever it is. If this goes and he's not allowed to have a jury by his peers, the EPA will use this on every single person out there too that has ever done any land work on their property as a way to do the exact same thing. Just start fining every landowner across the planet, or I should say here in the United States, excuse me, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you imagine if they do that for millions of landowners? They just start going, okay, 10,000 slap here, you move the creek, 10,000 slab. Oh, you bulldozed that hill because there was too many rock and you couldn't plant a vineyard there or an orchard. Oh, 100,000 over here. You put a road up through the forest, and that forest had some sort of drainage that you put a plastic pipe in there to stop, and you reverted that. They could really go down granular with anybody who has property at all. So I can see this as being one of the next big moves. The non-insurance of homes because of fire, this is the thing, it's newly designated fire risk zones. So last year the people could get insurance that were not in a fire risk zone, but Canada's moving to setting up new deemed fire risk zones where insurers won't. So they're going to have to leave their cabins, they're going to have to leave their farms, they're going to have to leave their lakeside properties. What if you owned a lake and you had a home on there, but it's just like 2 years away from being paid off, but you don't have the money to pay it off in one lump sum? You're still going to lose your mortgage, and they're going to call your note. So if you can't pay it off, then they're just going to swoop your property. Now, somebody will be there to buy it, I assure you, BlackRock. Somebody will be there to give some sort of fair value. But those homes are all going to get sold off, and you're going to get off the land. And they just took how many tens of thousands of people, preppers, those who lived in tune, those who were out in the countryside. Tens of thousands of people are going to need to leave these areas with no insurance for their homes. And then we have the EPA pulling this new trick here. So we'll see. This is one of the most important legal cases you could possibly follow for the rest of the year, because what happens to this guy on his own private land could happen to everybody else depending on what happens here. So I don't know, Ransom, this is off of Ag Facts. And why don't I just even send you the link here in Skype, since we're chatting on there tonight. Here you go, that you can put that up. And, to be denied a jury of your peers for something that the EPA says you did, this is a whole gray area also. Can government regulatory bodies sue you and then put you through their own in-house, complete from from the complaint to the paper filing to the litigation, the judgment, and then the summary, and then the fines, all seen in-house by one agency against a single individual? From start to finish, judge and jury, executioner, all in between is in-house from the EPA for this guy. And he's like, nope, I'm not playing that. Not playing that. We're going to a jury of my peers, others around in the community that are also farmers that live around here, and they're going to judge me, not you. Because I know for sure the guaranteed outcome from going in-house with you is guilty, pay the money. So this is a huge thing here. Huge. I cannot reiterate how giant of a story this is here. And it just came across my desk when we were on the break. That's why I didn't talk about it earlier. So Ransom, how many ways from Tuesday can they try to take everybody off the land, do you think? Or there's got to be another couple ploys that they're going to try too?
Well, they always got eminent domain. And, if you live in other countries besides the U.S., maybe the U.S. further down the lines because of some of the talk that people have said on kind of one side of the uniparty, like Gavin Newsom, everything from banning, propane and gasoline powered cars, or not being able to collect water, or not growing this or not growing that. They have endless ways to try to stifle humans living off the land without much aid from the government or the powers that be. And, this is kind of if he can get this jury trial with actual peers, because this is the problem, at least in the United States, is that the jury of your peers is no longer a jury of your peers. It's a random group of people picked nearby somewhere in the city or, district that you live in. And most of the time, not to talk bad about people that are on juries, but mostly the kind of statist, state-worshiping people are the ones that are more than happy and like to go to jury trials and be the juror, whether it's criminal or not. But you find this all over government, from like child protective services to environmental courts, where they have these courts that are outside of the Constitution and aren't upholding anything about that, which means that your rights aren't protected, et cetera, et cetera. And they try to pull this, and they create these out of the legal system courts to try to do this to people. But if he can get a jury of so-called peers, I said I have little faith in that. There is always the power of jury nullification, at least here in the United States, something that is considered a bad word. And as far as the government's concerned, this is terrorist talk. But in our Constitution, it gives the juror a lot of power. Matter of fact, it's more power than an elected official or a lawmaker, in the sense that they can nullify a law. They can get rid of the law, saying they don't recognize the law, it's unlawful, doesn't make sense. Jury nullification and the power of the juror is the most powerful form of government, at least in the United States, where you get to not only judge someone's guilt or innocence, but you also get to judge the law. The jury gets to judge the law, and that's something that you're not even allowed to talk about in front of courtrooms or in courtrooms or any of that, or you might get arrested. And it's pretty bizarre that you would get arrested for a constitutional right. But the jury of your peers has kind of been removed a long time ago, because the whole idea of that is that you would get tried by a jury of your peers, meaning people that you know and interact with in the community, like your neighbors, the guy at the store that you go to, the hardware store, or the church, or et cetera, people that you actually know and that they could judge you. Now, that could be a good or a bad thing, depending on whether or not the community likes you or not. However, it's a lot better chance of getting a fair trial from a group of people that know and understand you versus an outside foreign influence, i.e. a bank or the EPA or a government entity that has nothing to do with your local area, your community, the people you know, or anything. So this is indeed like a foreign power coming in and doing that. So his best bet would be to have a jury trial. But, this kind of leads into the bigger picture of how they're trying to convince people across the board that for one reason or another, to protect the planet, you're going to have to make sacrifices, including losing rights, land, access to the planet, and things like that. And you see articles like this. Here's an article from Scientific American, Lost Cities and Climate Change. Now, this article goes into the fact and admits that there is no man-made climate change, just in the article trying to argue for the idea of man-made climate change. But it gets into the Cahokia civilization and how they came to power because droughts stopped, because the climate changed, pulling Arctic air down, later making droughts and probably fires. And, the whole civilization kind of collapsed, but then it came back when the rain came back. And actually, at times, I know for a fact, some of these Cahokia sites were completely flooded out, not from drought, but from floods. And this whole article points out over and over again, kind of kills its own argument. The climate change is real, and it's cyclical, and it has nothing to do with man doing it. So everything from droughts to freezes, just like what I was saying before, these things have happened. They're going to continue to happen. But you can kind of judge kind of what's going to happen by listening to people that pay attention to the cycle. Like Diamond at the Oppenheimer Ranch is a great person, like geologist, stratigrapher. He knows the cycles too. DuByne, you've been talking about these cycles forever. So it's not like something that you can't go find out from your own educational experience and go find out, well, what are the cycles? What was it like? And this article itself talks about tree rings that prove that these El Nino and La Nina cycles catastrophically change the fundamental weather patterns of a certain area over and over and over again. And then it also admits that, I forgot where it was down here in the article. The fact, and this is the best part, my favorite part, it was down here. Where was it? Where it actually talks about how these changes were caused by the solar output and also volcanic output, which are tied together. And you can speak to that even better than I can, of how the sun and the output from the sun is directly correlated to, here it is right here. These changes are attributed to some combinations of natural, internal, climate variability and externally forced changes from the solar activity and increased volcanic eruptions. Their effects were profound, right? Well, obviously, and they're also profound now. So when you hear people talking about the magnetic field collapsing, solar cycles, sunspots, et cetera, there might be a connection. I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying.
You are a scientist, man. Don't fake it. You're actually one of the world's best researchers on petroglyphs in the American Western region. Yeah, we all have our talents, but I mean, you have something. I would love to go run around with you out there and, just chase petroglyphs all over the place and, match those up with graphics and understanding of plasma geology and plasma physicists that can replicate the same petroglyphs in a plasma laboratory in their experiments, depending on how much voltage is put into the system and the output on that, and, interpreting that and meeting with some of the indigenous there that highly respect you because you understand what their traditions were telling and what their forefathers told and left on the rocks as warnings to the future and the warnings to us right this second. Like, you guys interpret that and understand it to the point that they, of the original peoples, understand that you understand. And that's what the category where you're at, where it's like huge respect there, man. Huge. Once you get on that level, there's no faking it when you get there. You understand that knowledge or you don't. And you either understand a witness of the stars. And I actually do have this book. Somebody gave me this book. His name was Bob. And thank you, Bob, if you're listening. It's called A Witness to the Stars. And I got the first book, and it was sort of biblical references about stars and what energy is and trying to explain Berkey currents through biblical terms about flows of the heavens and, these types of things. Well, there's some images here in each individual star sign. They have the Southern Cross, and how navigators through the ages would use stars. And then they talk about the sextant and how that got, and then it goes into, then it gets into the biblical references of different, zodiac signs. And going through the book again, there's only one, Aquarius is the only one that shows the pouring out. The Aquarius is the only zodiac sign that shows a Berkey current actually coming out of it, flowing into Pisces or striking the eye of the fish in Pisces. If you go through all 12 zodiacs, it's the only one. The only zodiac signs. That's it. And it's called Witness of the Stars. So, when there's these planetary alignments or there's some sort of geologic feature that could have been plasma struck from space lightning, this sort of thing. The ancient stories, I delve into that too, but you start to see there's a cycle coming back. I mean, it's so clear to see. I look at it as the cycle is going to do what it does. I mean, is it an energetic cycle? It has to be some sort of energy. Now, is it a tuned down energy or an amplified energy? And it's going to be accompanied by magnetism / electromagnetism because it's a change to our system. So what that means is the input to the system is changing. And it has nothing to do with you. It's not CO2. It's not you. It's the sun. But it's actually not the sun at the same time as it is, because that amplification or decrease in flow, whatever happened to change into the system, I'm just going to leave it as change, is from elsewhere. That's what Aquarius is showing, the pouring out, this, energetic flow that we're getting into now. The sun's responding to that current flow from another part of our spiral arm of our galaxy. We're just passing into it now. See, it's always there. It's just our solar system isn't in it in its orbit around other stars all the time. We come into it, we come out of it. It's no different than winter and summer. These seasons change, they're regular. We know when they come. It might not be the exact time. It might be a month earlier, a month later, 2 weeks, but it's generally around that time. And you start to see signs when the seasons are going to change. Well, it would be no different than if our solar system revolving through the heavens comes into times when hey, there's going to be an increased flow into our star that we're just generally heading into a more energized region of space. We'll simplify it. You're heading into an energized region of space that's actually in a bound current of positive negative arc, but you know, it'll flow through space, and it's 800 years long of our time spinning through this, or it's 12 years long of time of moving thousands of miles an hour through the space in front of us. But that current flow is always there, and it's more energized, and we are just going to pass through it, and it'll be a 12-year journey for us in our solar system time. But as we transit into this thing and move in and out of it, the entire system, from the star to the magnetism off of our star, the Earth's magnetosphere, our poles, which have moved even further, even since our last conversation last week or 2 weeks ago, the poles have moved further. I mean, the change in the system. Okay, so you know it's here again. You're the ruling families who've had this knowledge for minimum 12,000 years, and we'll just keep it super simple, right? Since the Younger Dryas, you know, somehow previous tech got carried over. Your families still have it. You're rolling through the last 12,000 years. Well, you know, we're into another cycle right now, and it's getting to the point where it's no longer hideable. I mean, you just can't. This is where it comes into. They're trying to have you disbelieve what your eyes see. And this is in front of us. You can't logically say that all these things are happening and it's just because they're happening. It doesn't really make sense. If it's pushed and pulled and programmed to do such a thing, oh, absolutely, it makes sense. But for what reason? We're at the cycle beginning again. We're into it now. It's the point. It's amplifying. But why wouldn't, see, my whole thing is why would you never tell the populace of the planet that we're going through? I mean, the education system, Ransom, you alluded to it. It's just there for you to have a press a button, pull a lever, press a button, pull a lever. That's what the school system is about. It's repetitive learning of facts and regurgitation of the same facts, of the same things that were already learned and put in books. Why is there no experimentation to bring us new stuff all the time? It's only a select class of people that are allowed to bring us new stuff. The other 98% of you go back to the factory. 2% of these engineers and scientists and, you know, whatever else that it is, it's a very small percentage of the overall population that's involved in engineering or some sort of organic chemistry or these types of things. Why are we only that select a crowd allowed to invent stuff? Why can't we all invent? Why is the schooling system that you're not allowed to invent, you go be a factory worker? And it's been like this, a repression of, you know, expansion to allow us to get off of metered systems. There's a meter for everything. I was so shocked about the spring water, fresh spring water coming out. Some of the best water, bread companies come down here to get some of the spring water because apparently it makes the bread taste different when they're baking it. So that kind of freshness of spring water, and it's been an open spring for about 100 years or so. I mean, sheesh. People are like, oh, it's not purified. No, it didn't get treated by the city. I'm going to just drink some water that comes out of the mountain. Like, what? Even that freeness, like that's the only way we ever got water. You go back in time. Think about that for a second. The only way you ever got water was from a spring, or you got it from a river or a stream and you had to boil it. Even in the 1800s, believe it or not, you still had to boil water or else you get sick. So most people would get it from springs or higher up on the mountains and get streams that weren't contaminated. Maybe there was a deer that pooped in it or whatever. But generally, you know, even back 200 years ago, people are going for spring water because it's the purest. And everything we do is on a meter. We could have magnetic motors, electric gravitics, all these different types of unipolar generators and these kind of, I don't know, we have to pay for everything. Everything that should be free. Well, food, you can grow some of your own food. But everything you want to do costs money. Everything's on a meter. So I don't know, I'm looking at the reason I was babbling so much there, Ransom, I was looking at the Copernicus satellite, and again, the next story, I kid you not, we're talking about the next thing, this is off Copernicus satellite, which is a European satellite set of Centennial 3. What's their main image for the day? Oh, the smoke is reaching Sardinia after traveling thousands of kilometers from the United States and Canada. And it looks like a huge plume of smoke. So here's the thing. It doesn't look like when you consider a wildfire, and I know, Ransom, I'm rambling here, but I'm going to sign off. But the last thing to say is that what I was talking about, Berkey current, that flow, which is almost like an energetic line, like a high tension cable above your head. It's circular and it has its own form, and you know it's a cable and you see it in the sky. You know, the wildfire smoke's supposed to be this huge, hazy, giant mass just kind of moves over. Well, what they're showing on the Centennial images here is it looks like a line of smoke, not really a wall of smoke, but a conduit, an electrical cable of smoke. It's pretty trippy. You can see it bending in on itself, and it's very thick and coagulated around itself. It's really just a rope of smoke coming across, not even that big wall of what you would consider smoke from a forest fire, which is trippy when we're talking about current flows. I digress, man. Take us out of the rest of the hour.
You know, I was talking with the people in the chat, and they kind of gave me an epiphany. I spent some time a while back talking to Jordan Maxwell, who just passed away, I think, last year. But he talked a lot about how all of civilization is kind of hidden behind these different layers of education, understanding of the different hidden languages that we talk on a regular. And most people don't know, like, where sayings came from and why we use certain words to describe things. And one of them he talks about is the entire flow of money, and how the entire idea of that is based on maritime law. And, you also have, legal proceedings, and everything's tied up there. You have to, pass the sandbar to practice law, like the flow of money. And, when you're out of money, you're underwater, and all of these things. It kind of goes back to maritime law, which regards the water. And all countries have always participated in maritime law. It's the law of the world, being a water world, but not only being a water world, extending into the fact that human beings need to drink water to live. We're made out of water. We're born into water. So to speak, we're birthed just like a boat into the ocean, and we go to the doctor, to get the birth. And these are the kind of little things that he would point out, that the little hidden things in our language. But, talking about that, it kind of gave me an epiphany that me and you and lots of other people point out that we have changed ages. From one age to the new age, which is Aquarius. And we talk about the old phrases and sayings like beware of the water bearer, which is found in the Bible. And there's plenty of other references pointing out to this time period of a time of caution and, worrying about what would happen. But I was just thinking, maybe the water bearer is those people, these rulers, these legalese speaking, people that are behind the scenes, the shadow people, the bankers, the lawyers, these type of people that initiate the legal system on everybody, that comes up with these rules, regulations, mandates, etc., that are forced upon a supposed free people in a free civilization, but not really, because you're all under these things. And what gives them all power is these agreements that go back into antiquity, i.e. maritime law and the agreements of the ocean, the laws of the water. And it's funny, maybe that's what they were really warning us about, is this changeover into time. It is actually beware of the water bearer, or beware of the maritime law bringer, the bringers of the maritime. Because you think about what's going on worldwide, we're going into yet another world war. And of course, the oceans of the world and the trade of fundamental goods like food, which, guess what, comes from water. You can't get it without it. And the obsession of the world's elite to control every aspect of the human domain, from our thoughts to our food to the water. And with this, fake climate crisis idea of carbon dioxide, the plant food, trying to convince people that that's some kind of toxin. We get to that point where they have exactly what you said, found a way to meter everything in a legal way, where they have some kind of legal precedence to force upon metering of every aspect of our lives. And that includes, and not limited to, food, air, and water. So we are there, the bearers of the legalese system or the maritime law, kind of are in cahoots to control the entire world, and we know that. So I know me and you talk about this over and over again. It's time to do a counter-revolution or a renaissance era of human beings that begin to actually read books, think for themselves, have critical thinking, deductive logic, and a community of these people that interact and help each other with ideas, inventions, know-how, from growing food to cleaning water, all of the necessities of the human domain that we have, moronically given over to the powers that be to control these things for us as kind of like a daddy figure to take care of us all and worry about our food, water, and air. It's kind of time to take back that, but not just that, kind of the ether or the air of knowledge. This is the time to create a new renaissance. And if we have to create secret societies and private groups, which you'll be sought out by the powers that be if you do such things, and the horror of it, that people would get together, share their knowledge, and try to make a fundamentally better future for humans on Earth versus the other thing that they're trying to give us. So I think that's what's going on right now. Beware of the water bearer is literally that, the people that control the water. So take back your water, take back your air, take back your freedom, and grow your own food.
Well spoken. I think that's what's most terrifying is if everybody were to leave the system. Imagine if everybody grew their own food like the Victory Gardens and supermarkets. Revenue dropped 40%. We're all growing our own vegetables. See you next week. Big DuByne, Ransom Godwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution